Hello and welcome, I'm Karim Hatem. In a critical moment of escalating tensions in Gaza and Syria, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's visit to Israel marks a pivotal moment for regional security. His agenda to address urgent crises and the potential for a prisoner exchange highlights the American role in the Middle East and the diplomacy towards the region under both Biden and Trump. That will be our discussion today in depth. Stay tuned. Axios reports that Jake Sullivan is expected to travel to Egypt and Qatar next in a last-ditch effort to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza before Donald Trump takes office. The outlet added that President Joe Biden and his advisors have been working closely with Trump's team in recent weeks to push for a mutual deal before Biden's term ends and Trump takes office. Sullivan will meet with Israeli leaders to discuss a number of issues, including a detainee release and a ceasefire deal in Gaza, the latest developments in Syria and Lebanon and Iran. Now, providing more analysis about the dimensions of Sullivan's visit and its implications, we are joined now from Washington by Mr. Joel Rubin, a former State Department advisor, and from Jerusalem, Dr. Abdel Nasser Mekki, a political science professor. Welcome to the show. Now, let me start from Washington. Mr. Rubin, what is Jake Sullivan's priorities in this visit?
Well, it's great to be with you and with my colleague. The priority now has expanded. Clearly, initially, it was about getting a ceasefire for hostages, the potential deal on Gaza to end the suffering of the Palestinians and to end the suffering of the Israeli people and to move us forward. That's agenda number one. But of course, now with the region changing swiftly with the fall of Bashar al-Assad, that also is a very crucial part of the discussions, trying to understand exactly where Israel's thinking is strategically will be top on the agenda. And then, of course, the National Security Advisor is meeting with leaders from Qatar and Egypt, and I'm sure he wants to make sure that he gets their best insights as to the path forward on Syria. But again, of course, the primary goal is to try to get a ceasefire deal done and to get it done quite hopefully before President-elect Trump takes office on January 20th.
Now, we're seeing now images and footage of Jake Sullivan's meeting with Netanyahu. Perhaps one of the most significant things that happened in this meeting, that Netanyahu told Sullivan that the Israeli presence and the military incursions in Syria is supposed to be temporary, and perhaps what Israel is looking for in Syria and the military destruction of, or the destruction of military infrastructure in Syria is right now something in the interest of Israel. What do you think of that, Mr. Rubin, and how do you think this is going to play out?
Well, I'm glad that he's sharing that with Advisor Sullivan. Look, the Israelis, just like the other countries in the region around Syria, are all looking at what the collapse of the government there could mean for their security. Turkey is looking at it, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon. And so these are very aggressive actions. One has to be very careful about, in particular, the strikes against chemical weapons sites. Chemical weapons sites, they should not be there. That Syria over a decade ago.
It's not just chemical weapons, Mr. Rubin.
Right, yes.
The destruction was towards all military infrastructure.
To that point, though, the chemical weapons sites, I do want to bring this up because it's very important. These are sites that should not have been there, that Syria agreed to get rid of in an agreement with the United States and Russia. And there needs to be international verification that they are gotten rid of, and they can be very dangerous once impacted by strikes. But yes, to your other point, the key point, of going after the regime's military assets. I think the Israelis are looking at this now and saying these were targets that we always were thinking about, but we're not going to strike. And now there's a free opportunity to strike it so that we don't have to worry about
Right.
those being used ever against us in the future.
All right. Let me go to Dr. Abdel Nasser. Now, what do you think of Jake Sullivan's visit up until now and his priorities? It's not just including what's happening in Syria, but he's trying to perhaps a final try for a ceasefire deal and a Daytonese release deal in Gaza.
Yes, how are you? And welcome. Thank you for your guest me and also for your colleague. Okay, one thing for the National Security Advisor, Jack Sullivan. As you know, from the beginning he was following up this matter in the Biden administration. And today he visited Israel and also met with the Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I think one of his priority is, as that he talked with the hostage family 15 times. So he focusing on this matter. He want to handle this matter and to solve the problem of the hostages from the Israeli, and also at the same time, as you know, now Trump administration also pushing on Biden administration in order to solve this problem and to reach to as a ceasefire. Maybe it will be the type of disease fire, temporary or maybe short time. But at the end, there is many details that we couldn't know about this matter, about how many hostages will be released from the women, from the, that's old man, and also from the sick persons. But I think its priority now is on the hostages in Gaza, ceasefire. Also the humanitarian, that situation in Gaza is catastrophic, and it is dangerous, and also at the same time, it is horrible there in
Right,
Gaza. There are no
but
food.
Dr. Abdel Nasser, this is not the first or the second or the third visit from a U.S. envoy to the region in order to try to reach a ceasefire deal, specifically in Gaza. What difference is this visit going to have? Is Sullivan proposing something different than his predecessors who visited the region, including Antony Blinken?
That's also Mr. Blinken will visit the region and go to Turkey.
That is true.
Maybe there are another, maybe, or Egypt. Maybe there are another agenda like the Syrian, that's case. But also there are many, that things have been changed. Like there is some flexibility from Hamas, and this is reached to the American administration that Hamas now is not like before. It's not like strict, and there are some flexibility after the visit of the member of Hamas to Cairo, and also a meeting with the intelligence department there, and they discussed this matter before, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. So this is one thing. The other thing about what happening in Lebanon, as you know, after the ceasefire with Hezbollah, so now Israel have been, that's reached to agreement. We don't know if it will be permanent or not, but now they have ceasefire. Also, what happening on the Syrian, that's a case, and Bashar al-Assad, that regime have been forced. So all these elements encourage, and also at the same time, the Biden, the Trump, he want to solve this problem before he go to the administration in 20 of next month. So all these elements, that's encourage the American to send, as you know, delegation here, and this delegation will be like Jack Sullivan. And also at the same time, the Israeli sent the head of the IDF and also the head of Shabak to Cairo, and they meet with the intelligence department, Mr. Hussein Rashad in Egypt. And I think there are many of the indicators that have been, that's reached to all of the parties that they want to reach to agreement. And
All right.
today I heard here, even in Jericho, I heard here, many of people, they said that they are reached to agreement, but it is not until now. But this is
All right.
something like the people is seeing.
All right. Mr. Rubin, now, do you agree with this? Do you think that it's time for a ceasefire and it's time for a deal? And that's what the people want, all the parties want that. That's what Dr. Abdel Nasser is suggesting. And given the current instability in Syria, and as I mentioned before, that this is not the first or second or third visit from a U.S. Envoy to the region to try to reach some kind of resolution. What kind of outcome can we expect from this visit in regard to all of the above?
Well, the extraordinary changes that are happening in the region, in addition to the change in administration we're having here, have to have an impact on what happens on the ground in these ceasefire discussions. Well, Hamas has been decimated, destroyed militarily. Of course, it still operates inside Gaza, but its primary sponsor of Iran, is in retreat as well. Hezbollah has been devastated. Assad has now been kicked out. And so for the Hamas leadership, they have very few assets left. And in addition now, with President Trump weighing in, that will have an impact as well on Prime Minister Netanyahu, because what Donald Trump has said is he wants a deal before he takes office. And then, of course, the important part, which we're talking about, these hostages, there are half a dozen Americans still in this group. And for President Biden, this has been a legacy issue, to get Americans who are incarcerated, unjustly imprisoned, in harm's way, to get them out, get them free. He's been doing that throughout his 4 years. So I think now is the window where we see new pressures, different from the past months, very new political pressures that create the opportunity. And let's remember, if there is a real ceasefire and the hostages are released, that will be good for the Palestinian people. That will be good for their conditions, the humanitarian assistance that can flow into Gaza that is not getting in the way it should. So new dynamics right now, and I think that's why we're seeing this renewed push coming from the White House.
But are there any signs of what you're saying? Because you mentioned that Hamas now is is destroyed, and no, just 1 second. Because this morning there were still shellings in Gaza.
Yes.
So why are you optimistic that Israel is going to submit to any kind of pressure right now?
Well, you know, I got to say, I think that if you're looking at it from the Israeli perspective, they have seen many of their adversaries and their enemies disappear or greatly diminish over the past year and a half through their own efforts and others as well. They're in a very strong position right now. And again, with President-elect Trump coming into this discussion, he adds another layer of pressure to the prime minister, and also support to the prime minister if Netanyahu decides to agree to a deal. And on the same side, Hamas, who are their friends right now? Who is supporting them to continue this war to nowhere? This is not a war going anywhere for Hamas, except in the wrong direction from their goals. They started this on October 7th, and they've only seen losses across the board for the Palestinian people, for Hezbollah, for Iran, and for Assad. So that's why the dynamics now might be more opportune than they were in previous months.
Okay, I'm going to continue this, but let's take a look into the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's crucial visit to Israel amid escalating tensions in the region. As my guest said, his mission focuses on reinforcing U.S. Strategic interests, balancing regional security, and addressing the complex dynamics of Middle Eastern conflicts.
Thank you.
The visit of U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan to Israel holds significant geopolitical weight in light of the current challenges in the Middle East, particularly the escalating conflicts in Syria and Gaza.
President Biden.
The timing of this visit is critical as it coincides with heightened tensions in Gaza following the ongoing Israeli aggressions and mounting instability in Syria, exacerbated by foreign interventions. Sullivan's missions appears to focus on reinforcing U.S. strategic interests while also addressing the broader security implications for the region. The U.S. role in the Middle East has been shaped by two contrasting administrations. Donald Trump's aggressive stance with focus on isolating Iran and asserting Israel's regional dominance, versus Joe Biden's more cautious approach, balancing engagement with allies and managing the complex Iran nuclear issue. Sullivan's visits aims to reaffirm Washington's support for Israel amidst the Gaza conflict, while simultaneously addressing the volatile situation in Syria, where U.S. interests intersect with both Iranian influence and Russian military presence. A potential prisoners and detainees exchange between Israel and Hamas is gaining attention as recent developments indicate growing momentum toward negotiations. Sullivan's diplomatic efforts are likely to include discussions on this front, providing an opportunity to ease tensions and demonstrate U.S. commitment to regional stability. Looking ahead, the evolving dynamics in Gaza and Syria combined with shifting U.S. strategy under Trump will likely influence regional security in profound ways. The U.S. aims to maintain a balancing act between its support for Israel, managing Iranian influence, and pursuing de-escalation efforts in Syria.
Welcome back, and let me welcome again my guests from Washington, Mr. Joe Rubin, a former State Department advisor, and from Jerusalem, Dr. Abdel Nasser Mekki, political science professor. Now, Dr. Abdel Nasser, I'm sure you have something to comment on what Mr. Rubin was addressing previously, talking about the Israeli priorities right now in Gaza, and would Israel be submitted into some sort of pressure to a resolution for a path for a ceasefire deal after Jake Sullivan's visit?
Yes, I think I want to add something concerning, that even the internal situation in Israel. As you know, there is a trial against Netanyahu, and now he will be accusing, as you know, for many, that's like briberies and fraud, and also like breach of trust. So this is also will influence on the Israeli, that's thinking about to finish this matter of the hostages. And also there are pressure from the Israeli people. Now they are focusing on this, and also there are more pressure because now the Lebanese, that's war is stopped. The Syrian now also there is the Syrian. They have been busy with another things inside Syria. So I think there is no any justification for Netanyahu to say that he is busy with another agenda. Now the things that he should be focusing in order that he could send a message or good message to the public opinion inside Israeli and the families hostages is that he now focusing on this matter to release the hostages and also to make agreement with Hamas. As your guest said that, yes, therefore Hamas, after the Lebanon, after the Hezbollah, and after what's happening in Syria, and after the, that's the death of many of the leaders of Hamas. Now Hamas, as you know, is stay by itself now. So I think also the other thing is the flexibility of Hamas for going to agreement. Also, they encourage the Israeli to go also to make this agreement. And that's even now the Trump and Biden, they want to push in order to solve this problem, especially for Biden. They want to finish this before Trump is coming to the administration.
Right.
So all these, as I said, elements is in these things.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Rubin on this now. Mr. Rubin, what do you think about what Dr. Abdel Nasser mentioned, even the internal pressure on Netanyahu, given that Netanyahu doesn't just have internal pressure, he has external pressure. He's been convicted by the ICC for alleged war crimes, and there has been violations for humanitarian law and international law, of course, in Gaza. There's been violations recently for the 1974 agreements in the buffer zone in Syria. How do you think all of this is going to play out after pressuring him into some sort of resolution?
Well, I don't think that he's very concerned about the 74 accords being violated, quite frankly, because the government with whom they made the agreement no longer exists. And I think that Israel would want to make new security arrangements with the new Syrian government, and the ICC as well. I think he's negotiating with many governments around the world that this arrest warrant, and it is an arrest warrant, it's not a conviction, that it not touch him. But the big point, and this is very important, is he does care about what the Israeli people think. And this trial now is going to take a lot of time, 6 hours a day, 3 days a week for a number of weeks. Now, will he use it to do what Donald Trump did here in the United States, to make a political argument to rally his supporters? Yes, he probably will. But he also does need to show some wins. And I think, again, going to this issue of Donald Trump wanting to see some type of agreement for the hostages to be released. Trump does not want to deal with this on day one. And of course, President Biden wants this to be resolved on his watch. All of that coming together, and the improved strategic position of Israel now in the region does give him, I think, a window. And I'd say he should take advantage of this window to make a deal and move us in a different direction on Gaza. Right now, there is no vision for what Israel wants to do in Gaza, and that's what's very concerning here in Washington.
Mr. Ruben, I'm sorry for the interruption, but we have to go live to see now the Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his visit to Jordan. Going live for this.
An interim government and to a better way forward for Syria. And part of that also has to be ensuring that ISIS doesn't rear its ugly head again. And critical to making sure that doesn't happen is the so-called SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, that we've been supporting. They've been critical in making sure that ISIS is kept at bay. Critical also to guarding the detention facilities where thousands of foreign terrorist fighters have been detained for years, keeping them off of the battlefield, keeping them away from rejoining ISIS. That's a critical mission, and it's one that we have to see be pursued going forward.
And will that be the message to Erdogan?
Well, it's certainly one of the things that we'll be discussing, but again, all of these conversations are looking to bring all the countries in the region together, as well as beyond the region, in a unified approach to supporting the Syrian people as they emerge from this dictatorship. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Well, that was Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken during his visit to Jordan, speaking to the press and probably saying the same statements that the national advisor, U.S. national advisor, have been stating regarding to also his visit to the region and regarding to security and stability in the region and what the U.S. hopes to achieve through these diplomatic visits. Now, going back to my guests, Mr. Joel Rubin, former State Department advisor from Washington, and Dr. Abdel Nasser Mekki, political science professor from Jerusalem. Mr. Rubin, you were talking and I interrupted you, or perhaps the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, interrupted you. He was probably describing what the U.S. wants from perhaps the final visits of the Biden administration's top diplomats in the region. What do you think of his statements, and do you think perhaps that given the current situation, the United States perhaps could reshape its view towards the Middle East?
Well, I was smiling when you mentioned being interrupted, I have to say, by the Secretary. I've known Secretary Blinken and worked with and alongside him for a number of years, and he's always a gentleman, so I don't think he meant to interrupt me. But to your point, look, President Biden, in many ways, is handing off tremendous opportunities in the Middle East to Donald Trump when Trump takes office next month. The question is, will Donald Trump take advantage of these new opportunities, or will he look away? And I fear he may look away, but he should not, because with, as Secretary Blinken said, the Syrian people emerging from a dictatorship, with Lebanon having the potential for a new day, with now Syria's dictator gone, a weakened Iran, a weakened Hezbollah, hopefully a ceasefire here. There needs to be a push by the next American administration to support the people of the region in this transition. And I'm not confident entirely that Donald Trump will want to do that, but the Middle East always has a way of reminding American policymakers that it matters.
Perhaps we'll have another chance to talk about what the Trump administration could do when Trump takes office next January. But for now, thank you very much, Joel Rubin, a former State Department advisor from Washington, and many thanks to Dr. Abdel Nasser Mekki, political science professor from Jerusalem. Thank you both for your insights and for joining us. And that's it for today's episode for In Depth. Thank you for watching. I'm Karim Hatem. Stay tuned for more on Q News.